But I think that was the biggest airdrop I ever got. And I think it was in the mid 5 figures, and just came out of nowhere.
But I know staking can be very, very profitable. Like even back in the day, I like with Matic, Polygon. Like I was just delegating and I made over 6 figures just from staking Matic.
The most recent one is actually Celestia, which was a 4-figure airdrop for most cosmonauts because it was given out for Atom and Osmo stakers that, paid a couple of months through the bear markets for many cosmonauts.
Now, I totally missed the whole Cosmos airdrop because it was quite the bull run. But how much money do you think people were making from airdrops in Cosmos?
If we switch from like the validator's perspective to a delegator's perspective, I think that has also been kind of part of my strategy in 2021.
Now, let's say we want to go high risk, high reward. Let's say it's top of the bull run, 2025, 2026. What Cosmos projects do you think can do 100x?
Okay, I have 3. I mean, there's many more, but let's say 3.
Hey, Tokemetrics family. Welcome back to the 100x show. And we have the legend himself, Michael, Cryptocito, the Cosmos and airdrop staking king. Michael, welcome to the show. How have you been?
Yeah, thanks, man. It's an honor to be on the show. Big fan, of course, since many years. I've been following your stuff. And it's good to be on the other side of the mic sometimes. So thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I mean, I recall we met, back in 2018? It was, I believe, China, then Colombia. And you've kind of been traveling the world doing your own thing. But definitely a pleasure to have you here. For those maybe on our channel or audience who don't know about you, tell us, who's Cryptocito?
Yeah, I mean, I got into crypto in early 2017. For me, it really clicked when I really dug deep into how money works, central banks work, and then how Bitcoin is just a great solution for it, right? And also like the whole implications behind it. So yeah, I think that was super important. Like when I got into crypto, it took me around 6 months before I even invested money into it, just trying to fundamentally understand like how, what does this all mean, right? And what's the whole technology behind it, at least to a degree that I would understand it, because I don't have a technical background. But I think at least, non-technical people should always try to like at least understand the basics of it. So, and I think that helped me to survive now 2 crypto winters. We're obviously just coming out now of a crazy crypto ice age yet again. But yeah, I feel very confident. I think the tide is growing with each bear market, and the community is growing, the interest is growing. So yeah, and obviously I then when COVID started, I also started to create content myself, trying to tell people a little bit about my journey and some of the mistakes I made in order to help people avoid making those mistakes. And then somehow stumbled upon Cosmos in late 2020, which for me really resonated because of this philosophy of seamless interoperability, right? I know back when we met in 2018 in Shanghai, like interoperability was always there, right? It was always an idea, and the one chains, the icons, the Aeons back then, like they have tried it with an interoperability alliance. That was kind of my first introduction to that whole field within crypto. But yeah, Cosmos really resonated a lot with me because of that. And I think it's one of the most welcoming, one of the most active ecosystems in crypto. You can see that with all the developer stats, with on-chain stats, right? It's not fully there yet, but I think there's huge upside potential. But I think the groundwork is pretty much solid. And now with the Celestia, Say networks, and Anomas that are launching, it's coming together. So very excited to be in Cosmos, very excited to be here and talk a little bit about the exciting stuff that's going on in Cosmos.
Very nice. Now, before we delve deeper into Cosmos, because we're also very bullish on the whole Cosmos ecosystem, kind of share to us your crypto journey and crypto success story. Because as you mentioned before, you've weathered 2 ice ages, 2 crypto winters. So kind of tell us how you got into crypto, how you went full-time, and the success you've had in crypto.
Yeah, I mean, I got into it during my university studies, and that's the place really when you have also time to experiment with new exotic things. So I met a couple of friends or people that were studying with me that we just sat late night shisha sessions at our university dorm studying about crypto. So that's how I really got into it, and I think I always had this mentality that I want to talk about things that I also have used, right? So obviously in 2017-18, it was pretty much only speculation, right? Remember the white paper, ICO boom, and all these kind of things where they were just basically selling ideas. And then really the first bear market, 2019, 2020, was where we, for the first time, saw like some applications, right? And then obviously the DeFi summer, which is where I started to really double down at that time, right? And tried playing around with all these DeFi protocols on Ethereum, which then eventually priced most of us out. So we had to also look for alternatives. That's where the Solanas came up, the Avalanches came up. So I played around a little bit here and there. I've never been a big trader. I've never also been a big degen, but I think I experimented around with it so that I can also talk from a user's perspective. And yeah, that eventually led me then to Cosmos. And when the first time I made a transaction with Kepler and I sent an IBC transfer from Osmosis to the Cosmos hub, I was like, this actually works. Like, this is actually cool, right? And this really made me stick in Cosmos because the UX was just superior to what I have experienced before. And that led me down the rabbit hole. Obviously, then when I started the channel and got into Cosmos, I saw a lot of missing pieces in Cosmos, such as, for example, Cosmos never really had a flagship conference, we just had Solana Breakpoint, Ethereum has DEF CON, Cardano has an annual summit that's giant, right? So when I saw that in 2021, I was like, why does Cosmos not have something like that? And I was based in Lisbon at the time where Breakpoint started, where Avalanche had a big event. I was like, we got to do something for Cosmos. So we started with the idea to get Cosmonauts together, which escalated really quickly and turned out to be a massive 2-day conference, which now evolved into the annual conference in Cosmos that is called Cosmoverse. I know last year part of your team was also there, of the Token Metrics crew. Even at the first one, I think they were there.
Yes.
And yeah, we just finished off Istanbul recently, which was a huge success. 1,400 people were there, 3-day event, 2-day hackathon. So yeah, we filled that gap with Cosmoverse. And then also another venture I started at that time, which came out of my channel and the content I did around Cosmos, was the validator operations called Stakecito. And now over the past 2.5 years, we grew to a team of 6. We're validating across 37 mainnets, I think, and around 5 to 7 testnets that we're currently in. And I think across the board, we have around $40 million in assets under delegations from around 80,000 unique wallets all around the world. So it's really cool to see. And I think I really want to encourage people to take a more proactive approach in crypto, to not just only be an investor, but also to say, hey, I want to make videos, I want to make content, I want to run a validator, to also understand different sides of crypto. So that's really what I did. And obviously the past 2 years have been brutal, but here we are. And I think now we're coming out of this negative phase, and there's still a way out of this, and positivity. So I'm very glad that we survived the past 2 years.
So how did you go from, as you mentioned before, not being technical, to running validator nodes in Cosmos that have over 40 million delegated or staked with it?
Yeah, so I was around that time in 2018, 2019, where I really went deep into crypto, based out of Shanghai back then, which really was the epicenter of crypto back in the days. I went to every single event, I went to every single meetup, and I met a lot of people. So I met one guy then in 2018, who is now the co-founder of Stakecito, and him and a friend of his, who has a strong technical background. He's a cybersecurity expert. He's running all the technical infrastructure, and then the third founder, co-founder, he's doing a lot of the governance and operations. So I think it's a good team structure. I think what I really did is just also connect the dots with the right people around me that I met over the years. So Stakecito is co-founded by 3 people that all have their fields, right? I'm more like the marketing and strategic phase and role that I'm taking. And then, we have a CTO and a COO. So yeah, I think I'm happy that we managed to build up such a strong team, because it's super important as a validator.
Okay, that's awesome. Now,
Yeah.
how does staking work, right? So let's say somebody's running a validator, right? Let's say someone wants to do their own node for Cosmos or some other blockchain. What does the business model look like, and how much money can people make running nodes staking?
Yeah, that's a tough question, because obviously it depends on the market prices, right? For example, we're running a node since April 2021 on the Cosmos Hub on Atom, right? The chain in Cosmos, which is relatively profitable. But if you were to start today to say, hey, I want to validate on Atom, I think the threshold is quite high, which means you need to have, I don't have numbers right now, but I think it's in the high six figures or maybe even seven figures that you need to or I think it's at the six figures that you need to have in order to become to get into the active set, which is where you actually start generating revenue, right? So you have this threshold because Cosmos chains or tenement-based chains use basically delegated proof of stake. There's a limited number of active validators. On the Cosmos Hub, it's 175. That set also gets expanded through on-chain governance votes usually. Celestia, for example, just launched. They only have 100, and the threshold is already at $400,000 US that you would need in delegations or as a self bond. So you can also buy yourself basically into the network in order to be in the active set. So I think that's really the first step, is to see how heavy is the lift to get into the active set, and from there it's really how do you manage your operations? Where is your company registered? How many team members do you have? There's operational costs, right? You also maybe have technical contributions, right, where you have additional staff that you need to pay. So it's a lot of additional cost around it. So it really depends. Some validator operations are just a one-man team. And some validators are a full, organization with 40, 50, 60 people that also do a lot of, technical contributions. But they also usually have other sources of funding, or they have investors, right? But I think as an individual in Cosmos, there's also other chains that are smaller where the entry barrier is not that high. And I think that makes it such a diverse ecosystem, right? It's you can find a lot of different things because Cosmos is just an ecosystem of sovereign layer one blockchains. So everyone is kind of finding their flavor, their niche, their community, and it's cool that people can join depending on what they like.
Okay, yeah, that definitely makes sense. I know with one of our portfolio companies, Nolus, that Tokenmetrics Ventures invested in, we actually have our own node that we're running, and it definitely took some initial capital or tokens to do that. But I know staking can be very, very profitable. Even back in the day, with Matic, Polygon, I was just delegating, and I made over six figures just from staking Matic, right? So I think that's something people kind of don't really look much into. Is you can make a lot of money or revenue, especially in a bear market, if you find good, solid projects and you stake and you earn that yield over time, right? So I think that's something people can definitely look further into, especially with the Cosmos or other ecosystems.
Yeah, I mean, if we switch from the validator's perspective to a delegator's perspective, I think that has also been kind of part of my strategy in 2021, is to not say, hey, I don't necessarily want to catch 100 or 1000x. I rather want to optimize for cash flow, right? Because some of these chains have higher yields. But it goes much deeper than that because, those yields, especially if they're very high in the beginning, it's not sustainable, right? It's inflationary rewards. So there's also sell pressure. So you have to also evaluate the product market fit of the chain. You have to evaluate the sustainability, the team, the quality, all these kind of things. But I think, just considering or factoring in the amount of cash flow, like you're saying, right? Some people live off that. I mean, throughout the bear market, F was launched and it had very high inflation in the beginning and it had a good price. I think it was at $2-3 when it launched, and it stayed there for a couple of months. That paid a couple of months through the bear markets for many cosmonauts. Plus, we got a decent airdrop. So people for staking Atom got the F1's airdrop, which they then staked and lived off the staking rewards for a month or two. So I think there's a lot of people have definitely done that, and it's a good way to increase your coin count and to also cost average down without having to buy, right? So you can just stake and compound, and you would lower your entry price over time.
Yeah. Now, I totally missed the whole Cosmos airdrop because it was quite the bull run. But how much money do you think people were making from airdrops in Cosmos? Because I know it's a whole big thing in the whole ecosystem.
I mean, that's a tough question because there was an airdrop, I remember, Chihuahua. Have you heard of Chihuahua, which is like this meme coin chain in Cosmos? And that actually like came kind of out of nowhere. But I think that was the biggest airdrop I ever got. And I think it was in the mid 5 figures, and just came out of nowhere. Obviously now, 2 years later, it's much, much less than that. But yeah, we had some decent airdrops in the 4 figures or 5 figures. The most recent one is actually Celestia, which was a 4-figure airdrop for most cosmonauts because it was given out for Atom and Osmo stakers. But yeah, I mean, I would say like somewhere in the 6 figures at the peak prices, right? Like obviously now that's not the case anymore. But yeah.
Okay, that's very interesting. I didn't quite know Celestia was a Cosmos project because this is basically a modular blockchain for connecting different layers, right, of the whole stack. But they're particularly targeting Cosmos ecosystem?
No, so Celestia is a full-on standard Cosmos chain. It's built on the Cosmos SDK. It runs on Tendermint. I think, some of these Cosmos chains are very public and proud, and, it's part of their narrative and branding to say, hey, we are Cosmos, right? But then you have the Celestias and DYDX even that are like undercover Cosmos chains. I think DYDX made a big announcement when they said they switched to Cosmos, but they don't go out to everyone and say, hey, we are a Cosmos chain, right? So I think Cosmos, that's maybe good and bad at the same time, because one, it means, people don't necessarily know what is Cosmos and what is not Cosmos. They just always think Atom equals Cosmos, and the rest, like, I don't know. But at the same time, it's also good because it shows that Cosmos has very, very organic adoption. And if you combine it, quite a large user base and quite a large market cap, right? If you calculate all of that in. Even Sane Network is a Cosmos chain, right? Which made some waves a couple of months ago. So yeah.
Now, because I understand, like with Sate, I know they're using the Cosmos SDK to build, but is it an actual chain you can connect with in the Cosmos ecosystem?
Yeah, it's fully IBC enabled. I think when Celestia launched, it got first listed, if I'm not mistaken, on Osmosis, which is like the premier DEX in Cosmos. And I think it even pulled higher volumes than most centralized exchanges. So it's a full-on Cosmos chain, IBC enabled. But I think that's also a good point, right? Like some chains out there, for example, Third Chain is also a Cosmos chain, but they don't have IBC enabled, which means Rune, the native token, is not part of the IBC gang, how cosmonauts like to call it. So some people say, oh, Third Chain is not a Cosmos chain because they don't have IBC, but it's still built on Cosmos, right? So I think the question is also like, how do you define a Cosmos chain? But I think as long as it's built on the Cosmos SDK, uses Tendermint, you could make the case for it for sure.
Okay. Now over here at Tokenmetrics, there are lots of Cosmos projects we like. So from the Sane Network, Injective, Kava, even Canto, although they're migrating to Polygon ZK EVM. What are some Cosmos projects you think our audience should take a look at that you like?
It's actually a long list. I'm just going to open mapofzones.com, which really is the place where you can track the whole creation of the IBC economy. And you can also sort by volumes. You can see which are the most active chains. You see IBC, daily active users, weekly statistics, all these kind of metrics. I think Osmosis is the flagship DEX in Cosmos. People should definitely know about that. Osmosis launched in June of 2021, basically took IBC to market. StarGaze, a premier NFT platform, also amazing UX, great team, long history, core cosmonauts, been around for a couple of years. Kujira is also one that gained more traction, especially recently. And I think overall, we're seeing more and more X-Terra projects making more waves, right? So Kujira is one of them. Mars protocol is one of them, which is a lending protocol. And Akash network, which I know you also covered on your channel. Akash network is also a Cosmos chain. So yeah, those are a couple good ones. And I think there's more exciting chains that are launching, right? Like I said, Celestia and DYDX just went live. We have Anoma coming up, which is a privacy focused blockchain, or Namada is the L1 that is called. We have Babylon chain that is bringing Bitcoin to Ethereum, Bitcoin to Cosmos. So yeah, it's a very diverse ecosystem. And I think whether you're in NFTs or DeFi or infrastructure or AI, you'll find something in Cosmos.
Okay, that's awesome. We'll definitely check that out. Now, what do you think about Atom 2.0 that's, I believe, is coming with improved tokenomics?
Yeah, so Atom 2.0 actually was announced last year at Cosmoverse, and it was basically this idea to completely revamp the Cosmos Hub and Atom. That went on-chain actually for the community to vote on, as it was back then, and the community rejected it. But what the community did as a result of that, they took all these individual elements from Atom 2.0 and built out their own refined projects out of it, right? So for example, one part of Atom 2.0 was to build out a council. Now, 1.5 years later, we have the Atom Accelerator, which is a fully on-chain funded DAO that is funding a lot of the developments around Atom. You mentioned the tokenomics. That was a big part of Atom 2.0. Now, the AA DAO, the Atom Accelerator DAO, actually funded a team to really go deeper into that, to revise Atom tokenomics. And that proposal that they've been working on now for over 6 months is actually going on chain now in the next 2 weeks. So the community will just vote on these individual pieces instead of one big vision. They will vote on individual projects and improvements. We've seen some of them already pass, such as shared security that went live earlier this year. We also have the first consumer chains, the first 2 already live on mainnet, which are called Neutron and Stride. Not sure if you've been following those. But yeah, so I think the Cosmos Hub is really maturing now. But since it's fully, on-chain governance driven, which means every single Atom staker has a voting right, and there will not be any changes without the community approving it, means things are sometimes a bit more heatedly discussed on Twitter. But it's also a good side effect of open governance, right? And I think the Cosmos Hub community understands the direction, at least on a big picture. And I'm confident that some of these ideas will be baked into the main protocol in the coming weeks.
Okay, sounds good. Anything else you haven't shared with us that you're very, very excited about in terms of the whole Cosmos ecosystem or staking or airdrops?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to Cosmos ecosystem, I think people also underestimate the liquidity gates that have opened throughout the bear market. Namely, we have Kava, which is an EVM-enabled Cosmos L1, and they launched native USDT, Tether USDT, a couple of months ago. So that's the first time that we have Tether USDT natively in Cosmos. I think there's already like $150 million that were minted on Kava. We also have Noble, which is an app chain for native assets, and they have a partnership with Circle, and they already deployed USDC. So we have both USDT and USDC native assets in Cosmos, and I think obviously the market's still relatively dry, but I think this is a good starting point for institutions and big money to flood into the Cosmos ecosystem in the next bull run. So I think that's one thing. Another thing would probably be that we also see IBC, this inter-blockchain communications protocol, which is really the flagship, the soul of Cosmos, that is now also branching out into other ecosystems, right? So we have composable finance, for example, that already deployed on mainnet a IBC connection to Polkadot. So Cosmos chains can now interact through IBC with Polkadot. We have a team that's building IBC compatibility with BNB chain. There's 3 teams working on bringing IBC to Ethereum and Solana and Avalanche. So I think once you have all these IBC connections to all these other ecosystems, then it's really like this fully interoperable vision that Cosmos has realized. And I think that's also something that, people should be aware of, right? So yeah, those would be the 2 main things. Maybe in terms of airdrops, I think that's obviously something everyone is always excited about. I think, there's a couple of rules. I make videos on this every 3-4 months to remind people, but, hold self-custody, don't stake with a centralized exchange. Your key is your airdrop, right? I mean, really make sure that you have custody in the first place. Choose your validators wisely. Choose validators that you think that are, acting with integrity, that are acting also, with in the interest of the chain they're validating on, and just be active. I mean, yeah, it's really about that, because sometimes people text me like, oh, you didn't tell me about this or that airdrop, but like you have to really be active, because sometimes there's short claiming windows where people have to take action. So you really need to be on top of the things. But yeah, holding self-custody is number 1 priority there.
Okay. Now, what do you think about Canto? Because I understand they migrated to Polygon ZK EVM as opposed to staying on Cosmos. What do you think about that?
I actually haven't really followed them recently. I know when they launched, because I think Scott Lewis is their founder, who has a strong background from the Ethereum community. So what they did is when FMOS launched, they forked the code base, added a compound fork to it, and immediately gained a lot of traction. But I think they never really managed to properly capitalize and sustain that traction, right? So I think it just dried out a little bit in the bear market. I don't actually know what the exact reasons are to migrate away from Cosmos. But since it's a very bottom-up ecosystem, there's not one core entity to talk to. Some people just maybe get frustrated over time, because you literally have to do everything yourself in Cosmos. So that's maybe a bit of a downside there. But yeah, I don't know the exact reasons why they migrated away.
What do you mean you have to do everything yourself in terms of like the security, or?
If you look into other ecosystems like Avalanche, Solana, right, there's core foundations, core teams. Like if you have technical questions, if you want access to any sort of resources, it's, I think, a pretty straightforward process. In Cosmos, we have some organizations, but the accountability is quite diluted, to put it like that. So some people, even enterprise, when they get into Cosmos, sometimes they land with me, like the YouTuber guy, right? I was like, guys, I mean, I can connect with you with some people, but I'm not a decision maker of, whether you should get a big grant or something like that. So I think that there's ways to fix that. There are some attempts. I also try to contribute my best to make this a more seamless process. The whole onboarding, like that's really what I'm referring to mostly. But I think when it comes to that, business development specifically, Cosmos has a bit of a disadvantage because of that design, right? App chain philosophy means you have a lot of sovereign teams that are all doing different things, and they also have different interests sometimes. So there's sort of one organization that rules everything, right? And that's just by design.
So how bullish are you on Cosmos versus Ethereum, Polkadot, and all these other L1s out there?
I mean, compared to Polkadot, I'm like 100x more bullish. Ethereum obviously is the big daddy, right? It's the chain of chains. They still have a lot of issues, and they don't have on-chain community governance, right? Like the decision-making process is still relatively centralized, right? If Vitalik announces something and the core development teams, the community has to take it. And Cosmos has a much more open process in that way. But obviously, I'm bullish on a lot of things. But as I'm mostly spending my time in Cosmos, obviously that's where I'm mostly bullish on. Now the question is, if you say you're bullish on Cosmos, what do you buy, right? Like what asset do you buy? And I think that's also where people are struggling with. Having some Atom is definitely a must if you want to bet on Cosmos, but it's also not enough. Like you really have to think about how to have exposure to Cosmos and different categories such as liquid staking, such as DeFi, NFTs, right? The Cosmos Hub doesn't do DeFi itself or Atom. So you have to also hedge your Cosmos exposure by investing into other coins. So it's a bit less straightforward. Whereas if you say I'm bullish on Ethereum, you buy ETH, done, right? You're bullish on Matic, you buy, or Polygon, you buy Matic, done, right? So in Cosmos, it's a bit more complex. There's still this voluntary shelling point, which is Atom as the coin in Cosmos that started it all, where a lot of value is also now being accrued to. I mentioned to you shared security earlier. So there's now alignment through shared security and through more interchain services that the Cosmos Hub wants to offer. So I think Atom is still like, if there was a safe bet in Cosmos, like I would say, if you put a gun on my head, I would say Atom. But it's more complex than that.
Now, let's say we want to go high risk, high reward. Let's say it's top of the bull run, 2025, 2026. What Cosmos projects do you think can do 100x?
Okay, I have 3. I mean, there's many more, but let's say 3. If you say, okay, I'm bullish on Cosmos, I'm bullish on NFTs. If you're an NFT guy, you have to look into StarGaze. Stars is the native token of StarGaze. If you say, I'm bullish on Cosmos, I'm also bullish on Ethereum, and I'm bullish on DeFi, you should look into Somnier. The coin is called Som, S-O-M-M. They have around $40 million in total value locked, and they have a solid team, strong product market fit. And if you want to bet on a probably more exotic newcomer smart contract platform that's implementing JavaScript for JavaScript developers, maybe you should look into Agoric, BLD. That's also, I think, a severely undervalued coin right now. So those would probably be my 3, like, super high risk, but potentially high rewards bets.
Okay, awesome. Any last words you have for our audience before we close up shop?
No, I think, like I said, mapofzones.com is really a place where you can read and learn about the adoption and user activity on some of these chains. And I think Cosmos is a very interesting ecosystem. So if anybody wants to learn more about it, feel free to check out my YouTube channel, my Twitter. Also, come to Cosmoverse next year. It's really the place where, like, within 3 days, like, you meet everybody in the ecosystem. So and really honored, to be here, to talk with you and to be on your show.
All right, awesome. Great having you here. Definitely check out Cryptocito on YouTube and Twitter and everywhere. And as we like to say, the moon is not the limit to the moon and beyond. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, we have even more content for you at Tokeometrics. Get there using the link down below.